The topic today is the work of prayer.
Yes,
And as I'm looking in your book, you write that nothing you found would replace your inner practice of prayer.
yes.
And I thought and then you wrote a beautiful poem, which I hope you would read for us in this recording. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about your experience with prayer and how it evolved and what it means to you now.
I think probably the most important thing I can say about prayer is that it does evolve. Um, so however we start and whatever we are doing at any stage in our lives, we can be fairly sure that as we grow older and practice more, that our practice will evolve, and it may very well become less verbal. And actually, someone interestingly enough just a little while ago sent me a little sort of message on over the internet, and it showed a couple of I'm not allowed to call them Red Indians now, am I? Native Americans sitting by a river, and the words were, "You go inside. You go inside a building to talk to God. We go outside into the natural world and let the Creator talk to us." Well, there you have a perfect example of how prayer may evolve, you see, from us talking to God. In other words, God do this, that, and the other, um, to simply sitting in silence before God and first of all beginning to appreciate that He is the prime mover in creation rather than us. Well, perhaps to begin with, we don't think it's more meaningful, but certainly later on we will discover it's much more meaningful to listen to God rather than talk to Him. Um, and I've been used to meditating in silence for most of my life. It's entirely natural for me to sit before God in silence, and that's what I do. Um, and incidentally, there is more to it than that because um, you gradually come to see that what gets in the way, the real impediment, the cause of our troubles in life is me. I am in a way, with my thoughts and my sort of wanting to present God with an agenda of what I think is necessary to happen. See, this is really an impediment to the natural operation of God, of God as creator of the universe, as the one who knows best. So prayer may evolve further to just simple trust. In fact, the last words of the Jesus prayer, which we mentioned earlier on, "Have mercy on me, a sinner." Well, a sinner is all that really separates us from God. And the more we look into this, we come to realize that the only cause of trouble in this world is me. Is what's called the ego. It is this separate creature that has absented itself from the presence of God and is bedeviled by self-will. And if we're lucky, we may begin to reduce the impact of this throughout our lives and end up saying, "Thy will be done," rather than mine. The less of me, the more of God. Me, I am the problem. I am the cause of the world's troubles. It's no good blaming anybody else. The buck starts here. So really prayer is ever more, or ever less of me, more of God. It is utter humility, being nothing before God. Just like the grass blows in the wind, into thy hands, O Lord, thy will be done. And with that can come a marvelous peace, a trust, a realization that the world is in the best of good hands. And really, we've no more need to worry. Into thy hands, O Lord, as Jesus' last words on the cross. God is the judge. We've no need to judge. That all our judgments is just our own ego thrusting itself forward. The less of me, the better. So that's what prayer has reached in my life. And it's the most meaningful of all actions. Then you realize the almightiness of God. I think there seems to be no end to our ever deepening appreciation of the almighty, most merciful, the wisdom, the goodness, the glory of God, the love of God. Somehow the less of me, the more the majesty of God becomes apparent. And it's in our total surrender to God, the total surrender that we find, it's in total surrender to God that we find our total everything that we really need, our total fulfillment, our total purpose. Because really the ego sort of melts away to nothing. What is it? It's just dust. Look at me, an old man. What'll happen to John Butler? I'll soon just be in a grave, won't I? I'll be nothing. I'll just be forgotten. Then the spirit just returns to the God that gave it, like a river reaches the ocean. And we melt into the magnitude of what we call God. There's no more separate will to be anything. That is, in my understanding, man's ultimate perfection. When he comes back home, you see, as it was in the beginning, is now and ever shall be.
John, in your book, you wrote a beautiful poem. Would you like to read it for the recording on page 148?
I have to put on my reading glasses and adjust the light so I can see it. I wrote this just to remind you it's not quite 40 years ago, but almost well over 30 years ago. A long time since I've read it. Let's see how it goes. Beyond the finest subtleties of art or sound, eternal providence of God is found, wherein a soul may innocence extend, surpassing knowledge without want or end, save only finding ever more and more its own belonging, unity and more. Deeper, yet ever deeper, O my love, my Lord, in you forever my whole heart outpoured, beyond all worlds abilities and powers, beyond all measure, any sense of ours, beyond description, yet quite simply here, in which we rise and fall and disappear. The everythings we find on earth are not this way. There's no comparison, no way to say. I lie awake at night, the rain outside, the windows of my soul are open wide. Away I fly, away with God to be. Oh joy, to leave the body and be free. Where do I spend the time? What time? I cannot say. What happens in long hours alone, and when I pray? I feel within myself a deep release, and midst life's conflicts live a greater peace. So clear it is, and yet few words I find to share with old realities now left behind. Worldly knowledge, ways of life, work and world affairs are echoes of a distant life and cares, but now no more. Like children's toys long since confined to nursery cupboards and the dust, treasure on earth corruptible, subject to thieves and rust. The world's necessities are now no more my needs. I eat its food, but food no longer feeds. I feel a distance from the worldly day, apart, unknown, as if it's turned away, rejecting this, unwittingly deluded, to which I call, but cannot be included. Who understands but you, O Lord, yourself incomprehensible, beyond all our beyonds, yet apprehensible, who bridges the unspeakable beyond, and here with us, your church, your body, house of prayer. May as we as one, fulfilling each our vision, so do your will on earth to merit heaven.
Beautiful, John. Thank you for reading that for us. You also write in this book on page 153 that prayer is said to be the means of creation.
Well, of course, yes, it's so obvious when you see it. You see, it's awfully difficult for us as people. We're so totally convinced, you see, that this ego has reality. And at this level of understanding, wrapped up in this little cocoon called me, of course, I am a creator. I was a farmer. I created my own life. I used to working with my hands, making things. And, here is man, the creator, this big. and it's only in ever greater diminution, in ever less of this ego, this separate me, in the humiliation and lessening of the influence and emphasis on me, that one can expand greater into the realization of the real creator in big letters, which is this. Look, it's dark where I'm speaking from now in England. I'm looking out of my window and there's a sort of almost full moon just beaming at me. Who made that moon? This is my little world here. You can see it. I've got some lovely old furniture, nice old things. I've got them. I love my. I've got a little home here, but what is it compared to the heavens that extend outside my window? So this transition from me to that, it takes step by step by step. We have many little experiences of it, and gradually. And I find it so easy in old age now because it's so obvious that John Butler is dying out. I can't emphasize this too often. When we're young and beautiful at the prime of our strength, it's almost impossible to believe that because this is so dominant, it's so important. People come here and in the prime of their lives, they're so full of themselves and want to talk about themselves and, well, I suppose I was at that time of my life too, and but now I'm old, I look back and I can smile on it. And half my life I just forget about it. I can't remember what I've done. It seemed so important then. And now, what was it? Where's it gone? It's water under the bridge, isn't it? I can't remember my childhood. I can't remember the exams I passed as a schoolboy. How important they were, weren't they? It was so important to pass my exams and, do this and that and the other. So important to get my seed sown as a farmer, get the harvest in. And now, where's it all gone? It's just like a dream forgotten, isn't it? Where's it all gone? What's going to happen to John Butler? In a year or two, I'll be forgotten like all the other billions and billions of people who've lived their lives on this earth, been washed down the river of history. And which of you listeners isn't it going to happen the same to all of us? And yet we're so convinced, aren't we, that this is, this is, it's up to me to sort the world out, that I'm the creator of my own, X, Y, Z and all the rest of it. We build our houses, we build our little empires, we make our money, we have our play our games in this nursery of the world. I often think that humanity is just like a lot of children playing in a sandpit, building up their castles and knocking them over, fighting amongst each other. What do parents do? They just sit by the side and watch, don't they? It's time to go home for tea. Life, it's a funny business, isn't it? So prayer is really, well, it's so simple. It's all just a matter of turning from this to that. I keep demonstrating it like this, but it seems it's just exactly what it is, from the little to the great. Creator God, just look at nature, my dear. When you just look at the grass beneath your feet, see the wonder of something no man has ever produced anything compare in beauty to the grass, to the Mother Earth. The earth we cover with concrete and drive our cars over it and never notice it. Don't think twice about it, do we? Throw our cigarette ends out on the grass and never think twice. How can we? It's said that God counts every hair of our head. Who can make an eye? What could be more wonderful than an eye? Doesn't every creature have an eye? Dog's eyes, horse's eyes.
Why do you think so many of us are so deeply disconnected from nature?
Why, indeed, because we don't live like the native Indians do, because we've become what's called civilized, which is really just another word for unnatural, isn't it? We eat unnatural food. We're educated in, well, we're not exactly educated in natural wisdom, are we? It's nearly all man-made stuff, man-invented stuff, product of man, learn about man. Well, we drive around in cars, don't we? We live in artificial houses. We're not exposed to nature. How many people are in England? Is less than 1% of the population are engaged in farming, and farming is so unnatural these days. But anyway, it's better than nothing, and at least your feet are. Well, if you're not driving around in a tractor, at least you're close to the earth. But most people just hardly know what the earth is, do they? They don't know where their food comes from. No idea. Don't know what milk is. Don't know what bread is, where it comes from. I'm afraid our world perpetuates the myth of man being the most important creature, the primary mover of everything. And even though, the church has lost its hold, few people have that weekly habit of going to church, or at least you were given some sense of the existence of something other than man. Now few children have that. It's extraordinary to me. No end of children have never read don't even know what the Bible is, let alone ever read it or had it explained to them. I suppose educationalists are well, what's the use in blaming anybody? It's a funny world, but sort of through it there is this. Why do people bother to watch an old man like me on YouTube? There is a certain part of the population that's searching for meaning, isn't it? Trying to get back to some connection to reality, to something that's more natural. Thank God for that. I suppose there always have been people who look for a deeper meaning. One extreme leads to the other. Anyway, for me, 30 years ago in Russia, it was absolutely wonderful to be given this. I really felt it. I'd been told to do it, to go and pray. And I just leapt at this opportunity and just instantly I thought, oh, thank God I've got some work that I can believe in. This is what I can and what I want to do. And immediately prayer leapt into the most important work. And the more I practiced it, the more it seems just not only head and shoulders infinitely higher and greater, the best of all work that man can devote himself to, especially in a time like this when godlessness pervades almost everywhere. It's all balance, you see, my dears, where godlessness prevails, some people somewhere, sometime must redress the balance. That's what it's all about. Things go wrong when we get out of balance. That's what nature teaches us all the time, isn't it? We see it in animal populations, in plant populations. Nature restores the balance. That's exactly what happens in human society. The more crazy mankind goes, then from somewhere, God knows how, little voices of sanity are heard. And gradually these have their effect.
You write in your book, pure prayer in actual fact is not our own doing at all, but God's, and we become as empty vessels
Yes.
opening to Him.
Amen. Yes, that's exactly it. Yes. an empty vessel opening to him. Thy will, not mine, be done. And you see, we become really like it's like opening a door. I've got curtains in my room, but I always never draw them. But a lot of people do draw their curtains. I look opposite. There's another block of flats just across. I can look across the way. And most of the windows, they've got curtains drawn. People don't like the winter night. Well, all right, if they want to sit inside, watch the television, that's okay. But I prefer to look at the moon, really, and so I keep my curtains open. And so the moon shines in. Well, that's prayer, you see. Prayer is opening my heart so that God's grace, which is really the spiritual sunshine, can shine in. And the wider I open my heart and just, as it were, hold the whole world in my arms, open my heart to include the whole world, then all the grace can come in, can't it? But if I'm like this, and sort of with a shopping list, God bless X, Y, Z, and sort out the coronavirus and the war and this, that, and the other, I'm like that. Thy will be done, not mine. And because, you know, again, we don't really get it that we talk so much about being good. You see, the ultimate goodness is God. The only source of goodness really is God. But perhaps that's a bit too far, for people to swallow. But gradually this dawns on us that the only bad is me and good is God. I'm the problem. The less of me, the more of God. So in every way, the more I can open the curtains of my heart and surrender and say, thy will, not mine. You see, the more this spiritual sunshine, this grace, this goodness of God can enter um, and do its necessary work in the world. Mm. That's how it works. An empty vessel. Yeah. And see, that's where we are, it's in abandoning our own cares, you see, that we benefit because we feel so much better. Here I am weighed down by, I can't bear the world. I don't like my neighbours. And I would say, oh, go away. And I could be me. Oh, but listen, thy will be done. And it's such a relief, my dear, such a relief, this trust. You give your burdens to the Lord. This is exactly what he tells us to do. He said, lay your burdens on the Lord. Trust me. Trust me. Just as like, I was a farmer. I used to watch my sheep. I've always felt that sheep are among the greatest teachers in life because they just lie there. They submit to the weather. They never complain, No matter how cold and wet it is, they'll just carry on their dear, sweet lives. You never hear a sheep complain, or a horse, do you? Or a cow. No matter what terrible things we do to them, they don't complain, do they? Dogs do a bit, but most animals, they just accept. Well, to be like that consciously, because you know that it's better, you see. How much better than my silly me, my will? Honestly, half the words I say I'm ashamed of as soon as I've said them. We're such unreliable creatures, so untrustworthy men. In fact, God specifically tells us, put not your trust in man. But we do. We just lay our whole lives in the hands of other men. Because that's the size of our horizon. Well, we have to start from where we are and gradually. But we're talking about prayer, and I keep telling you that prayer evolves, prayer grows. And I'm talking to you now as an old man with many, many years of gradually learning to trust myself less and abandon more of oneself to God. I remember very early in my life, I came a book called, what was it called? I know, Self-Abandonment to Divine Providence. You know, one of the old-fashioned words for God was providence. In fact, there's a city in America, isn't there, called Providence on the East Coast, where some of the early settlers settled, and called their new settlement Providence. And they had faith, you see, that the Lord will provide.
You also write, it's
Yes.
hard to believe that our suffering and sicknesses are not real until we find
Yes,
ourselves in
yes.
a state of cleansing and witnessing their disappearance.
Wow, yes, this was a big one, wasn't it? I wrote that. I just been to. There was a certain Russian saint who lived in a hollow tree in the forest, and there was a little stream ran past. Well, the story is he dug out a little well, and water came forth from it, which flows to this day. And they'd made a typical Russian style, made of wood, a little bathing hut where you jumped into this cold water, and came out all clean and glowing. We've had a few people staying here the last few days, and we had a little meeting. And I think I told you this yesterday, didn't I? I looked across and looked into the eyes of a man opposite, and he was quite an intense. He looked straight at me, and I at him, and of course, when you do that, love flows. What else flows? It's just love, isn't it? And then the others sitting around the table sort of somehow caught it, and we were held in this sort of interflow of just pure love, and completely forgot we were separate people, completely forgot our individual worries and aches and pains and, all the various factors that made us separate. Just were raised to this purity. It's so simple. This is actually what happens in meditation, that if you learn to meditate, you let go, you see. And for half an hour, however long you're meditating, you can completely forget you've got a body, completely forget all your problems. In a way, it's rather like going to sleep, but in meditation you fall awake to a higher level of consciousness where these things simply don't exist. You're lifted to a higher level of consciousness, as I keep demonstrating up here, where all the troubles of the body and the mind simply don't exist. Here's the corruptible body, which is corrupting and going to die. Here is the equally corruptible mind, full of all sorts of everything. And here is the freedom. It's so simple. It's like getting into an aeroplane, going up through. You you take off from the ground. You go through the clouds of the mind. There you are in the clear upper air. That's what meditation is. Just like getting into an aeroplane. And these things, which seem so totally real when you're in the airport, just, God, dealing with immigration and how much luggage you've got and what's allowed and what isn't allowed. And you get up there, you just forget about it. The disappearance, where have they gone? Were they ever as real as you thought? Where have they gone? Where's your childhood gone? Where's the holiday you had 10 years ago gone? You've forgotten about it, haven't you? Where were those tears you shed over something or other? Can't even remember what it was for, can you? Maybe you can. How much we just forget. Just goes out of our reality. Hard to believe they're not real until we witness their disappearance. I think it's such a long, long learning process, my dears, that it takes years and years of little lessons like this to gradually sink into our thick heads that this is just a temporary habitation. Who could explain it exactly? I wouldn't. I've got my ideas, but I couldn't pontificate about it. But this is one reality, and that's another. There's a higher reality. I don't like to go around talking and saying the world's illusion. It seems a bit unkind, really, because when you're in it, it's totally real, isn't it? But times come when you begin to question it. Each in our own time will say, hey ho, perhaps it wasn't as real as we thought. You look at war memorials, the names on war memorials, 100 years old. Who were they, those men? God, it was all real enough at the time, wasn't it? The awful effects of young men being killed, and now it's women as well, isn't it? Things change. Then cities themselves crumble down, don't they? Civilizations rise and fall, and archaeologists go and unearth a few old ruins and wonder who lived there then. Who were these prehistoric men? You pick up a few bits of bone and wonder what it was all about. What did they think about life? Did they think as we do? Wondered what it was all for? Meditated? Tried to pray? I would like to encourage you, dears, because it has been such a good thing for me. I think even if I'm speaking to young men who are far from ready to devote their whole lives to it, as I do now, if I can convey the potential of prayer, you see, the hope of prayer in what often seems a hopeless world, this hopeless cry from the heart, what can I do? Find me something that's worth doing, that isn't just, doing some useless job in some silly factory or something that nobody wants to do, just become a wage slave, for God's sake. To begin to think in terms of real work, of reality, rather than perpetuating this high road to nowhere, which is so much of humanity's life. Only we are in a blind alley, literally a bottomless pit whose only destiny is death. That's humanity, really. Death row. But so we need to turn around the other way. This is what it's all about. It's the Christian word repentance. You see, is you were into a blind alley, looking towards the pit of death at the end of it. You got to turn around and start to walk out. You see, walk out to freedom. Freedom, my dears. Freedom isn't going scuba diving or something, or going on a holiday. Freedom is real freedom. This stuff, big country. Don't mess about with some man-made substitute. Freedom, my friends. Let bold hearts rise up and be free. That's the call. Freedom, love that never says no. That's what's worth living for. Not a human substitute. You'll not find what you're looking for among men. You'll just get little bits sometime from man. It'll satisfy you for a while. It'll satisfy the sheep among you. But where are the eagles and the lions? The real people who've got some guts in them. You're the leaders. Be the leaders among men. Show them the way. Turn back to God. That's what makes sense. You'll find it. You'll see lesser realities will crumble away once you get onto the trail of truth. Live for truth, my dears, not the powers of darkness. I tell you what's worth doing. The only things that are worth doing in this life are the things that bring you nearer God. So ask yourself, if everything you're doing, is it going to move me towards God or away from God? There you are. That's a way of assessing what's worth doing. Does it take me towards God or away from God? Now then, there's your choice.